You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lemons podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're going to make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. This week's episode features Miss Katie Zaccardi, and I'm very excited to share this episode with you because Katie is a holistic wellness coach for women in the music business. And we talk about a whole myriad of topics in this episode, but specifically some of my favorite topics are when we get into social media. Now, social media can be very, very daunting for a lot of people, especially musicians, and especially during a time like that we're currently in with the pandemic. It's difficult for those that are usually out touring and collaborating with their friends and other songwriters and producers and whomever it is. They're out creating content. But now we're kind of locked at home by ourselves and we're not able to create as much content. So social media can be very daunting in that case. So we talk about how you can create content in this current situation. You can talk about even when you're out, maybe you are out touring and collaborating and you still struggle to create content, how you can kind of create that content that everybody wants to see and your fans want to see specifically. Now, Katie will go into this in much more detail, but you don't need to have an account on every social media platform. You need to focus on the ones that are worth your time. Maybe you really enjoy Instagram, but you hate Twitter. Maybe you love Facebook, but you hate Instagram, and vice versa. It's this thing that musicians think that they need to be on every single platform in order to see success, when in reality, that's not true. In addition to social media, we talk about, how to kind of set your goals, how you can plan your goals out. Do you set a big one and work towards that? Do you set small ones? How can you kind of brain dump that and organize all of your thoughts to get to your goals? So before we get into this conversation, I want to remind you to please sign up to my mailing list, as it helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. There is a link down below, and you can also sign up on my website, which is lennonseahawk.com, also in the show notes. I would also appreciate a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, as it greatly helps the show get boosted in the algorithms and all that technological jargon stuff that I don't want to get into. I would also appreciate if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show. Please fill out the guest request form in the show notes below. I'm always looking for incredible movers and shakers and innovators in the music business, and I love having conversations with those people. So fill that out, and if you're a good guest for a good fit for the show, I'll reach out and we'll get something set up. Lastly, I would also want to shout out my Instagram. I post some podcast stuff there when I'm working on and kind of keep up with my daily life there as well. That's also in the show notes below. So without further ado, and me continuing to ramble on, as I tend to do sometimes if I don't keep myself in check, let's cut to the interview with Miss Katie Zaccardi. Katie, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it. Why don't you start by telling us who you are, and just so we can kind of get a foundation?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Lennon. My name is Katie. I am a holistic music career coach for women. And basically what that means is I help women in music build their music careers in a sustainable way that avoids burning out and avoids immense stress on their journey there. And I do it in a very holistic way, including strategy, including wellness, and including mindset, so that we're working on all of those things, both in their music career and honestly kind of in their life, because it's all really applicable. If you're really stressed out in your life, it's going to bleed into how you show up in your music career. So we tackle all of these things to really do the career growth and the personal growth so that my clients can grow, hit their goals, make money from music, and get where they want to be.
Can you kind of define the term holistic and how that is different from any other approach?
Yeah, so I used to actually just call myself a wellness coach for music, but the reality is, even though I kind of started just that way. Like at my very beginning, I used to call myself a self-care coach, and it was basically just helping women in music integrate self-care into their lives. Then it evolved more into overall wellness and mindset and doing like the deeper work and fixing people's wellness routines, getting them feeling good, making sure that they're able to stick to things, set their goals, manage their time. But the reality is that I got to the point where I was doing all of these things with my clients. Not only was I doing that, but I was also working on strategy with them. So when I say holistic, what I really mean is that I'm not just going to work with you and say, okay, you want to release an album? Great. Here's what we'll do. This, and that. Go. Do it. I'm just going to tell you all of these things. It's more about supporting my clients through it. Will I help them with strategy? Will I help brainstorm ideas? Yes, of course. But it's really about making them feel really strong, empowered, confident with their music business and with how they're showing up so that they can go out and they can execute these things. They can be able to overcome any stressors that come up. They can go out and be able to overcome any like self-doubt that pops up as they're on social media or as they're playing a gig, and work through any anxiety and things like that. Because again, it's all relevant in my opinion. So we're not just honing in on one specific thing and trying to get it done. Like I'm not just going to be the person who does social media for someone or teaches them how to do social media. We're looking at the big picture here so that, again, they're creating sustainable results. Do
you just work with women? Do you work with men?
Primarily women. And I do that only because I come from a background of like empowering women in a way. I used to work with the nonprofit Woman Crush Music, and I just saw that there was such a lack not only of mental health support in the music industry, so that's kind of one reason I got started, but also support specifically for women. Without sounding kind of generic, it's a male-dominated industry. I feel like the women communities have really been thriving online and in person in the music industry, but I really see that the like woman-to-woman connection really makes such a huge difference when you can find someone else who's there to support you and like hype you up and all of those things in music. And I wanted to be there for other women to support them through it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a male-dominated industry, and that's why I'm always excited to bring women on the podcast, because I love empowering women. I love hearing their stories and their backgrounds, and oftentimes they inspire me more than the men do. They just some of the ideas that they bring to the table is just so amazing. So I'm always excited to bring women on the show. So when you're working with these musicians and these artists, what are some common threads that you see among them? Is it like, do you see a lot of anxiety? Like, are you a licensed therapist? Like, how are you kind of working through these issues that they have?
I am not a licensed therapist, no. So when I work through it, it's really more from like a life coaching lens. I'm certified in life and success coaching, hypnotherapy, NLP, time techniques, EFT. So it's a different approach. I didn't go to school I went to school for music business. Like I didn't go to school for this. I just learned a lot of the wellness things through my own independent study, and from doing that study, because I experienced anxiety myself. I experienced a lot of mindset blocks, and especially money mindset blocks and things like that came up for me, generally speaking as a person, but particularly as a musician. So I kind of I went through this journey myself. I did the work. You know, I've taken a million courses on these things. I've done my yoga teacher training. I've really experienced what it was like to be an independent artist. This happened when I was in college, where I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, and I had no idea where to turn. I was told by the doctor to look into cognitive behavioral therapy and basically just sent on my way. And as someone like me who's a little bit stubborn, I was kind of like, okay, I don't really need that. I can talk myself through this stuff. But then it got to the point, and it kind of evolved, where I was like, all right, how do I figure this out? How do I figure out what's triggering me? How do I figure out how to work through my emotions, how to get more grounded, how to calm myself down, and how to be successful, especially as a person who was dealing with anxiety that could be somewhat debilitating. So it's personal experience, it's study for myself, and then I have gone on to do, like I said, multiple certifications and things like that. But I think that combination is what really makes my coaching unique, because I'm not someone who is just like, here's what the textbook says, like, this is what you have to do. I really get where my clients are coming from. And to answer the first part of your question, anxiety is definitely a big one. I see a lot of limiting beliefs happening with my clients. And what I say with, what I mean when I say limiting beliefs is that it's basically just like a belief or a misconception that they have about the way the music industry is, or about the way they can or can't be successful, or can or can't make money. And that is what really holds them back. And so that takes a lot of mindset work and like rewriting the stories there, kind of adjusting how we approach things and rewiring our brains in a way. And then on top of that, a lot of just forcing things, working so hard, working ourselves to the brim, especially in women. It's this feeling of like, I always have to do more. If I stop working, I should be working. I'm not doing enough. If I don't work like 16-hour days, then I'm never going to reach my goal. And so that's like a huge thing that I really want to take with my clients and totally deconstruct and allow them to see that they can have balance in their lives. They can. And in fact, when they prioritize wellness and when they prioritize that balance, that's when they will be the most successful. Because I think that in the music industry in general, but especially with women, because they're being told like, it's a male-dominated industry. So sometimes I don't even like saying that, because I feel like that just like adds to the pile. Because when we hear that, it's like, oh my God, I have to work so hard in order to make this happen. And I'm not discounting hard work. All of my clients work really hard, but it's not about like slaving yourself. It's about creating that balance and doing it because it feels aligned to you and because you're having fun from it. And that's what's going to bring you the most success.
Absolutely. And, it seems like, you talked when you first started telling that story that a lot of it is like the doctors, you just go to the doctor, they tell you, oh, you have this, here's a prescription, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're not actually working with you to like really come down, because your anxiety is different from my anxiety, and my anxiety is different from my mom's anxiety. And it's all this stuff is different. And it's a very, very unique approach. And I applaud you for working with these people. But on top of this stuff that you're always talking about and you're sharing with these artists, that, women also have to do with all these like harassment things, and like you see these blasted all over the news. So those are always in the back of the mind. And it's just like, there's so much stuff that's going on, so much bullshit that's going on, and it's always intimidating. So sitting down and working with these people one-on-one and really, really getting to the root of the problems and really ensuring that they're having a successful career is so, so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that everyone feels like they need to go at it alone, and that there's something to be said with like, I built this up by myself. I did it all by myself. I'm an independent artist and I do everything, and look how far I got. And that's something as well that I want to speak to, because I was an independent artist. I work with independent artists, but just because you are DIY or independent or whatever you call yourself doesn't mean you have to do it literally by yourself. I'm also a solo entrepreneur, you could say that. Like, I am one person who started their own business and is running that business. But I have coaches. I take courses. I have friends in that world who I know I can go to for support. I have a lot of different ways to get that support, not just because it's fun or because I like to spend my money or whatever, but literally because it helps me get further faster. And so I'm still technically like doing it alone, you could say, but I need that support, and I would not have gotten where I am without that support. And it goes the same for musicians. If you are an independent artist, you're running your own business, whether you think you are or not. And if you're going to run your own business, you're wasting precious time by not having someone help you with the things that you don't know, by not having a way to support yourself or be supported through your mind and the negative thought patterns and your stress levels when shit hits the fan and when stuff goes wrong and when it feels really, really hard, because it's going to feel really hard sometimes. There's ebbs and flows in all of this.
Mm-hmm. And that's so crucial. Like when you said you're an independent artist, that doesn't mean you literally have to do it yourself. I mean, yes, you could be independent, but it's also important that if you need a manager, you get a manager. If you need a publicist, you get a publicist. If you need a recording engineer, you get a recording engineer. If you're not sure of all these things, like being a musician alone is so difficult, and it's important that you kind of realize your strengths. Like if your strength is songwriting, then you should focus on songwriting and maybe start delegating some of the producing, the publicist work, so you're not overwhelming yourself, because once you start thinking of all these things that you need to do to get your music heard and get it recorded and mastered and mixed and all these things, it just gets so overwhelming, and it causes stress and anxiety. Like I know just thinking about it, it's held me back from releasing music in the past. Like it's just all the stuff that I have to do to get this song out there it's just too much. And so that's like working through these different solutions and working through the anxieties and what exactly are you stressing about? Can you delegate this? It's vital for having a successful career.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that that's where a lot of overwhelm comes from for my clients, and probably for a lot of people listening, is that like everyone has big dreams. Everyone can picture themselves getting the Grammy or playing the sold out show or whatever it is. If you're trying to make it, quote unquote, as a musician, you probably have a vision of that like near end goal, or what the true definition of success looks to you, right? It's like that big picture, that far out thing. But then when you think about getting there and you try to think about every single thing you need to do to get from you now to being on the stage at the Grammys, it's like you can't even do that. Your brain would combust if you tried to map out every single step right now. And not only that, you don't actually know what the whole path looks like. So that's why I think it's really important not only to delegate, like you said, get support or learn what you can't do instead of learning it all yourself. And I say this because I went through it, right? Like I went through it all myself, trying to be like, okay, well, how can I use yoga, or what tools are going to help me through anxiety, or what are my triggers? And it took me so much longer than it necessarily had to, because I went my own path. And now it's great because I can teach people. But if there's something that you can just learn from an expert faster, do that. Like, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone that you did it all entirely yourself and it took you 50 times longer. I mean, if that's what you really get joy out of, is learning all these things, then that's great. There's something to be said for that. But break it down, focus on one specific goal, one specific thing first, and then ask yourself, what are the steps to get there? And if you don't know either what the first step is, or the fifth step, or the last step, then ask, inquire, see if you can learn from someone else, see if someone else can help you with it.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where this industry is nobody likes to ask for help. And it's so crucial. And we look at the people that we've lost in the music industry recently. We look at Chester Bennington and Avicii and all these people. And they didn't ask for help. Or they maybe did, but it wasn't looked at like, oh, you're fine. But that's something, especially for independent musicians, is you need to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. And I think that's something we need to push in the industry, is that if you're struggling with something, it's okay to ask for help. We need to stop like stigmatizing that and making it such a frowned upon thing. Like if you're really struggling mentally or physically or just musically, it's like you can reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling. I need help.
Yeah, especially on the mental health front. I mean, whether you're reaching a goal and that's what you need help with, definitely ask. But if you're struggling with something on the mental health front, anxiety, depression, anything, even just feeling lost, confused, maybe you don't know what's going on, definitely reach out to your community. I mean, I think that even the times that we're going through right now really goes to show how supportive people can be and how amazing communities can be when they come together and when they have someone to support, when they have a reason to do that. Like, if you need something, reach out. And even if it's just reaching out to one close person of yours, or one person who you know maybe has struggled with similar things, and talking it through with them, and then maybe getting another resource that could help you. There is no right or wrong way to do this, really. Some people, a coach works with them and for them, sometimes a therapist, sometimes both. A lot of my clients have coaches and therapists and Reiki healers and whatever it might be, right? So it's just about finding what works for you and what you feel comfortable with and doing that. And I know it can be scary. I know that. That's why I always, usually if this comes up on a podcast, I'll say my DMs are open if you feel like you literally don't know where to turn and you need support and you need to figure out what direction to go on. Feel free to DM me on Instagram at Katie Zaccardi. But I encourage you to find someone who you believe will be supportive and somewhat unbiased and be able to talk about what you're going through with them, and then find a direction, find a way forward. Don't just kind of leave it there, but actually use this as an opportunity to work through it and get to that place that you want to be. Get to a place where you can feel better.
And that is so important. So a lot, you talk about goals, and I think goals are very important. We all need to set goals. And it's funny because I've realized certain things over the last couple of years. Like, I've set goals for myself, and I've talked about them before on previous episodes, but some of them, like the ones that always come to mind, are like when I lived back home in Minnesota, I had a dream of attending Full Sail University. That was like my dream college. I knew that's where I wanted to go, and I did it. That was goal number one, stepstone number one that I could take to make sure my career was going the right path. And then, of course, it was graduate and get involved as much as I can. And I did. And then my next goal was, work in the music industry, doing whatever it was, learning as much as I possibly could. And, sometimes I was overwhelming myself, but then being able to take a step back and kind of realize that I can't do all this. I need to say no, and take a break, because I'm going to burn myself out and wear myself out. And I'm going to get tired of the music industry and then, find something else, which is not what I want to do. And then I had another goal of moving out to Los Angeles, which I did. So as I continue to cross off things on my goal list, I realized that well, I'm here now. Now what? So it's like, I'm always kind of one or two goals. Like, I've got one or two goals now that I'm working towards, whether it be buy a new car, or whether that buy new gear, or release, an album, or collaborate with somebody. I always have one or two goals. And then when I check that goal off, it's like, oh, well, now what? So can you talk about maybe goal setting and some steps you can take to make sure that your goals are aligned with your vision, and maybe some things so you don't get burned out while achieving your goals?
Yeah, well, I think it's worth it to do a one-time brainstorm, brain dump, vision board, whatever works for you, of where do you want to go in your life? Like that one-time big picture looking 10 years down the road or so. And then it really comes down to okay, we have that. We sort of know what we're working towards in general. What's the first thing that's going to get me on my way there? And then look at that first thing and then backtrack it. I mean, I think that what you were describing, Lennon, is probably worked out to be a really good strategy, where you just took it one chunk at a time. What's right in front of me? Now, as an artist, you might be thinking, okay, but if I want to be a successful artist, let's say that's the general goal, then I have to do a lot of things, and they all feel equally as important. I have to play shows, release an album, build up my social media, create an email list, get a Patreon. All of these things feel weighted equally for me in the path to whatever. That's arguably true, I guess, but not really, because the truth is that doing one of those things is going to make you move forward on that path. So you want to just start with one, because otherwise, if you're taking one step forward a year in all 5 categories versus 5 steps forward, or probably even 10 steps forward, because you can really dedicate your time to something in one specific category, then you're going to see a major difference on your journey, on your path. So I'm just kind of using this analogy so you guys can start to envision what that looks like. Either you end up being 1 step forward across the board, or 10 steps forward in one specific area. Now, you might not have all of those areas worked up yet, and it might feel like you're behind, especially that's when comparisonitis starts to come in, where you're like, this person's doing this, what the heck? Why am I not doing this? Should I be doing this? Now I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Stick with your gut. Pick that first thing. So let's say that you're brand new and you're like, okay, I don't have music released. I've never played a gig before. I don't really have social media presence set up. I don't have this, I don't have that. Ask yourself, okay, what is the most basic thing I can do? maybe the most basic thing is set up an Instagram for your music, and just start posting as you write, as you start to practice things, as you go through your journey. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you're just slowly starting to document. So the goal is to literally set up Instagram and then do regular content. Now, you could talk about going into the expertise of social media, but if you want to really just like be able to move your career forward in a specific way, and you're thinking, all right, this is just a way for me to like document it and get something set up. Now I'm going to really focus on writing songs and then recording an album. So like you could have social media going in the background, right? Like you set it up, you got the hang of Instagram, you know how you like to show up on social media. You don't have to be an expert to make that work or happen for you. You just have to show up genuinely. So you spend a month figuring that out. Now you're good. Now you're going to focus on songwriting. Okay, so not only do you have the ability to showcase your songwriting on social media, so you're doing two things at once, but the songwriting is going to serve you because you're going to write songs for your next album. Now, focus on the album. And so do you see how I'm just kind of focusing, all right, what is like the next thing that I can do that's going to start building the blocks to my career? And eventually you'll get to the point where you are doing a lot of things simultaneously. You're doing social media. You've released the album. Now you're going to start gigging. So people can find you on socials, they can listen to your album online, and they can come play gigs with you. And so you keep learning more and more in these categories, but you don't necessarily start by trying to do everything all at one time, all in one day. Otherwise, it can start to get super, super overwhelming and feel like you have to be balancing a million things at once. And it totally drains your energy because you're also switching from one brain to another. If you woke up on one day and you were like, okay, this morning I'm going to learn how to master Instagram, and then an hour later I'm going to write 4 songs, and then I'm going to pitch myself to play a gig. Those are all 3 very different parts of your brain, and so it's really draining. That's what they call batch working, is when you kind of stick to one task or one type of task for a certain chunk of time because it maximizes your energy. And when you're not doing that, it really drains your energy. So that's what it kind of looks like on the big scale and on the really, really honed in scale of like your day to day.
That's really good information. And I think, kind of outlining everything and taking it one step at a time, and then you're not overwhelming yourself with doing everything, like creating a mailing list. You have to create blog posts and you have to do a Twitter post and all this crazy stuff. And, maybe you're lucky enough to have a friend who will help you kind of manage some of those things. But on a very basic level, like you had said, create an Instagram and just post daily content, whether that be a picture of you walking your dog, whether that be a picture of you writing a song, whether that be a video of you kind of playing your guitar or your piano or whatever instrument that you're playing, or maybe it's, doing something that you love doing. Maybe it's a hobby that you really enjoy doing outside of music. And showing your personality can also, it's not stressing, it's not limiting you to just being a musician. Like, oh, I just have to be a musician, because that's not all who you are.
Yeah.
I'm also a photographer. I'm also let's say a runner or a gymnast or something like that. These are the things that people and fans like to watch, like get an inside look on your personal life. And, maybe that's not something that you enjoy doing, is sharing your personal life. Maybe you just want to keep it to music. Mm-hmm. That's totally up to you. It's whatever it is that you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, and I think with the example I gave too, it also goes to show that you don't have to do everything to the maximum or to perfection. You might have, when I talked about social media, have been like, but Katie, you said that focus on one thing and let that go and like have that be your focus. Okay, yeah, but if you just start social media and you have nothing else, you can't keep posting on social media about your music when you're not writing songs or you're not working on music or you're not doing anything music related. It becomes useless, right? And you don't have to become a social media expert. In fact, you probably can't be a social media expert if you have no content to put on social media, and you can't have content if you're not living your life, if you're not doing things. So you don't have to be a perfectionist, right? You don't have to say, I'm starting with this thing and I'm going from 0 to 100. You can just start and say like, all right, here is my first goal. My first goal, like I said, setting up Instagram, because this is going to get me going. It's going to get me a presence and it's going to get me a place to start. And that's it. We don't have to learn how to master it and become the #1 Instagrammer first before we move on to any of our other goals. So that's just kind of a tip of one, you know, you don't have to be a perfectionist. Don't focus on being on that perfection. Just take messy action. Just get started. And two, you also don't have to do everything to the maximum. Focus on your goal, but also ask yourself, what is that goal? What is the quantity almost of that goal? How am I measuring it? And what's going to serve me most right now? How far do I want to take this in a way?
Excellent actionable steps, and like kind of laying it out even further. It just helps me and the listeners kind of visualize that these things, they're not all kind of like, I feel like when you're like, oh, I have to do social media, and you lump that in like, oh, you have to like literally sign up for every platform, Pinterest, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and you know, you have to do all these things, and then you have to start posting regularly. But then you start learning like, oh shit, each platform has a different posting schedule, and you know, and it just gets overwhelming, and it's like, okay, now I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it.
Oh my God. And you know, you saying that, even you just listing off all of the platforms, I'm like, oh my God, take it back, rewind. Because I can't even tell you the amount of clients I've had who have said, oh my God, social media is just so draining for me. And I'll always ask them, what platforms do you use right now? And then they'll tell me, and then we'll talk about what's actually fun for you to use. And then we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about the strategy of it. You know, I don't think that there is any reason to be on every single social media platform, especially if you have no strategy. Now, if you're like years and years down the road and you've built out different social media platforms for different reasons, and you are able to create the amount of content to really keep up with it and to really have a reason, honestly, to be on different platforms, then that's great. But when you're just starting out, pick literally one. Pick one that serves two purposes. Number one, it's fun and easy to use for you. And number two, it actually is a way for you to communicate with your audience. Because if it is one, like I wouldn't recommend people just having a YouTube, for instance, because it's not as easy for you to interact with people or like pitch your album when it comes out, or pitch your Patreon when it comes out, or invite people to gigs, just because of the nature of the platform, right? So something like Facebook, or I would say Instagram, is probably the most interactive. But what's most important is that you find what actually works for you and is fun. Start with one thing. Eventually, with any goal, especially like social media, that thing is going to become less of a goal and more of just like a daily task, a recurring task that you do. Yeah, maybe once a week you will plan out social media and you'll figure out what posts you're going to do, but it really is just a daily or weekly task, and you show up every day. And again, that's going to start to tie in if you have an album release or you're promoting a gig. This social media will be an aspect of that goal planning. But eventually, the idea is that you learn these things, you practice them enough that they're no longer like huge, big tasks that are taking up the bulk of your day, as is reaching a goal or like starting out with a certain goal. So that's also why it's important, because if you're starting at point A with like 3 different goals and trying to do them all at once, you're in the beginning phase, the like gritty, get down and dirty and learn everything and do the grunt work phase, versus being like, okay, I already know this is just kind of going, I don't have to worry about it, it's systematized, it's happening, I show up, it's easy, and I have so much more time to focus on this other thing. And then you can keep building on each and every one of those things that you add on as you go.
And how do you know when you can start maybe branching out a little bit? Like maybe you've got 6 months on Instagram, 8 months on Instagram, and you've got a lot of content on there. You're posting regularly. You're kind of building it into your schedule. And maybe you want to jump on Facebook, or maybe you want to start a Twitter, or maybe you want to start posting regularly to YouTube. Like, how can you start kind of planning and branching out to different platforms and making sure you're not doing it like, okay, I've mastered Instagram, let me join Twitch and YouTube and Facebook and Pinterest and all these other platforms, and then you start overwhelming yourself?
Yeah, well, this isn't going to be, the first part of this answer, it's not going to be as tangible as people probably want it to be, but I would say you're going to know when you're ready to evolve. You're going to know when you've locked in Instagram, where you feel good about it, when you and or your audience is craving something new. Like, you're just going to feel it inside, you're going to know. So if you're not knowing and you're second guessing everything, I highly encourage you to work on quieting your mind, maybe doing some meditation and just asking yourself, like literally putting one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly and asking yourself, what do I need? Or asking yourself, what is the answer to this question? And it will come through, but sometimes people just get so caught up in the like, what's the right thing? I can't make a decision. I don't know. And they let that voice take over. So try to get back in touch with your inner voice. And if you're really having trouble with that, reach out to me. We'll talk about it. Now, get yourself a coach, right? The second part of it is, what's the strategy behind it? And what would make the most sense for you? Like, if you just want to get a Facebook because you feel like that's the next best step, why are you doing that? What purpose would that serve for your music business? If you want to branch out because you feel like you should, but there's really no other reason for you to because you're thriving off of whatever platform you're doing right now, it might not be necessary. So ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish by doing this? If you want to share more long form videos, that's a great reason to get a YouTube, right? If you want to do quick videos or like quick tips or anything, then maybe YouTube is not the best. Maybe you could just keep it to IGTV, or maybe you could do TikTok or something like that if you want to like be funny or be creative or be different or something. Like, there's no right or wrong answer. It really just comes down to, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your intention with branching out? And do you feel confident enough in what you have already happening to be able to add something new onto it, learn something new, and dedicate your time to building out another platform?
And do you work with a lot of artists, clients that do this on their own, or do they have their own teams?
Most of my clients are doing it on their own. Some of my clients will hire out for specific things. So for instance, if they have a release coming up, or they're working on a particular project, of course, like most artists, they'll hire a producer, perhaps a videographer, photographer, things like that. And then some of them will also go so far as to do getting a press team on it, or social media help, or things like that. But most of my clients, they don't have a regular team built out. It's more project-based.
I'm not sure if this is 100% in your wheelhouse, but maybe you can speak to the processes behind it. Of, you have an artist that just finished up an album and has shared a bunch of content on Instagram that they've been writing and sharing little videos and pictures and all this stuff over the last 6 months that they've been working on it. And now they're getting to the release strategy and releasing it, and they're getting a little bit overwhelmed. Can you walk us through like the process that you would kind of take them through to ensure that they're being healthy mentally and kind of staying grounded, and also not overreaching and staying within boundaries, and kind of making sure that the release is successful on top of that?
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about this artist is going to release an album in the near future, right?
Yes,
okay.
Let's say in the next 3 months.
Okay, so 3 months, number one, great job. You gave yourself enough runway to figure it all out and to plan ahead, because that's the key here, is that I once had a client come to me and she was like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to release this EP in like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, no, you're not.
No, you're not. It's not going to work.
No, you are not. And we worked on it for just a couple months. And she was able to get on multiple podcasts, multiple articles, and have a TV performance all from the release. So she wouldn't have never had that if she had just pushed it out like she wanted to. So first of all, you want to have enough runway time to plan. And then you also want to have enough runway time to promote. So I usually recommend starting to prep people about a month out from the release. So the first things first is you're going to pick a release date, because you want to have a deadline for yourself to know when this is coming out. So you're going to pick the release date. Then you're going to say, let's say this is like a single, or I guess it could be an EP if you're doing the whole thing in one. If you're doing a single, then it would be a little bit different, because you'd say, okay, here's the single date, then here's the release date maybe like 2 weeks later if you're just doing one single. And so let's just say, for the sake of this, to make it simple, we're just doing one release, EP, no single. It's just the EP. You're going to say, okay, I have 4 weeks for my sort of promo. The first 2 weeks are going to be like ramping up, teasing it a little bit, prepping people, and then the 2 weeks before are going to be super, super hard promo. Now, I'm just kind of using this as an example. You can pick however many weeks or however much time you want to really promote things, but I would recommend yourself giving at least a month to go hard with the promo and to be talking about it, because you would underestimate, people really need to see things at least 7 times. Actually, that number might have even gone up based on new studies for like marketing, how much you need to see something to buy in or to even know that it's happening. Like a lot of people won't even know that what you're promoting is happening. And you might be sitting back thinking, why is nobody buying this or listening to this? I promoted it like all week. I got on stories like 4 times and talked about it. How do they not know? Not everyone is seeing everything you're posting. So, and they might have seen it once and skipped over it, because let's be honest, we've all skipped through people's stories when we're just being lazy. So
yes,
you want to make sure that you are being repetitive, you are being redundant. It might feel that way. It's not, I swear. And that you're giving yourself enough time to plan. So again, we have the runway, we've picked the release date, then we've figured out what date is 4 weeks ahead of that. So what I would recommend doing is figuring out, this is basically the process I take my clients through, but figuring out what are the main avenues we want to go about for promoting this, or, you know, getting press on it, or whatever. Some people are really excited about doing Spotify strategies and playlist strategies. Some people, it's just press, maybe just press and social media. So essentially just picking what are the things that I need to do to make this happen. The first thing is the song, right? You need to have the song recorded, mastered. You need to submit it through a distributor. You need to make sure the artwork's done. The second thing might be social media promo. The third thing might be press. So let's say we're doing those 3 big things. These are basically the 3 big strategies you're going to use to reach this end goal. Then you would take it and you say, okay, so for the song, what do I need to do? I need to record the song. I need to get it mastered, get it mixed, get the album artwork, submit to a distributor. If those are the 5 things you're doing, then you might also go in deeper and ask yourself, okay, for the album artwork, I don't have a go-to person, or I don't have a vision off the top of my head. So I'm going to, number 1, reach out to my contacts and ask them for designer recommendations. Number 2, hop on a call and discuss visions. Number 3, hire that person. So I don't want to go too far into it as to not overwhelm people, but I think you can see here the idea of you pick your strategies, you pick your 3 to 5 strategies and buckets that you are going to use to reach your goal. Then you're going to list out the tasks or the things that you need to do that, to effectively utilize that strategy, to support that strategy. So for instance, social media, it might be like brain dump social media ideas, record content or take pictures, schedule out posts / like plan social media calendar. So you can see how it starts to kind of go in there. And then in your calendar each week and each day leading up to the release, you're going in. And so for each day, you might pick 3 things, depending on how much time you have. Like if you work full time, you might only be able to do 1 thing. That's totally cool. You know, find what works for you. But as an example, you might do 3 things on your list each day. So you would go to this big brain dump. You would go to this big outline. Asana is a really great tool for project planning and something like this. And so I highly recommend you use something of that nature to keep track of the bigger goals planning and the tasks that you're going to do. But then you would go in, you would pick, okay, what are like the top 3 things I need to do to get started? What is like the number 1 step that I need to take first, then the second, then the third? Get that done first. And then as you start to check those things off your list, you go down, you accomplish more, but it's in your schedule so that you know that it's getting done and you're not just like flying at the seat of your pants wondering like, I wonder when all these tasks are going to happen. So that's kind of like, I try to condense that as much as possible, but does that answer your question, Lennon?
Yes, it does. Just kind of outlining step by step, and then just, making sure that everything is working for you. You're not overwhelming yourself. And that's kind of been like the repeating message. It kind of keeps coming full circle is like, don't overwhelm yourself. Like you don't need, like, if you have, like you said, your album's coming out, Maybe you don't have a Facebook, just push Instagram. You don't need to create social media accounts to push this album. Like, just stick to Instagram.
Yes.
That's where your audience is at.
Yes, so good too. One of my clients, she's been thinking about doing an email list, but especially with everything going on, things have been shaken up a little bit. And so she's working on now releasing her new single, and she was like, do I need to have an email list to do this? Because that just feels like really stressful to add that. And I'm like, no, of course not. You can have a successful release with what you have going on right now. And I know that sometimes we get caught up in the like shoulds of what we should be doing, or even fun ideas and like fun goals and things that we want to accomplish. It's not always like bad things that put pressure on us. Sometimes it's genuinely really exciting things we want to do. But we have to ask ourselves, what's really going to serve me right now, and what do I need to make the most of this without being overwhelmed, without sacrificing my sanity? Because I can assure you that if you're showing up from a place of stress, overwhelm, and honestly desperation, people are going to feel that, and your release or whatever it might be that you're doing, it's not going to be as successful, or it's not going to go the way you really want it to go. And you probably don't want to show up with that energy. You want to show up with an energy of ease, of positivity, and excitement. So focus on that. And if something needs to be put on hold in order to really make that happen, that's okay. Give yourself the permission to do that.
That's really good. That kind of brings me to my next point is when you're working on all these things and you're working on pushing your album to your Instagram or whatever it is, maybe you have an Instagram and an email list, that's fine. And if you're trying to create, Facebook pages and doing all this other stuff and you're just completely overwhelming yourself, well, let's say your Instagram account kind of takes off with this release, and then you start getting, opportunities to be on a podcast, or maybe your press team kind of picks you up and really pushes to get you on podcasts and media appearances and performances and, getting interviews for music publications. And you're so overwhelmed with the social media strategy that you can't even focus, and you're overwhelmed and you're not giving your best. So then it's going to be a project where you're going to look back and you're going to be like, I was not in the right frame of mind. This project really kind of fell through and it didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. And you kind of maybe lose sense of your vision for the project. So it's important to keep your plate as clean as possible, especially around release time, for you to keep yourself open for interviews on podcasts and blog posts and TV appearances and performances and maybe doing Instagram lives and things like that.
Totally. And when you were talking, the biggest thing I want to stress there is don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to tell your team to say no. If you do have a team, make sure that your whole team is super, super clear on what the priorities are for your current time, for the current quarter or the current month or the current phase that you're in. It's really, really important to make sure that everyone around you is on the same page. And if it's just you, stick to your guns. I know it can be hard to turn down a press opportunity or a gig or this, that, or the other thing when it feels like shiny object and you want to go grab it and you feel like if you don't take it, you're going 3 steps back in your career instead of 2 steps forward. But if it's something that's going to make everything else so much more stressful, if it's going to make you super tired, if it's going to take time away from reaching the goal that you've set out to do, or take time away from your current priorities. And when I say priorities, I basically mean, when I look at priorities, I'm looking at things in my wellness that are non-negotiables that I really have to stick to in order to feel my best. As well as any quality time or family time that I am committed to spending with others. And then the goals and the work that I'm doing and whatever my focus is on right now. So that's what your priorities would be. So definitely, you want to get clear on those. And then if it's going to really impact your priorities, take a lot of time away from that, and it's going to set you back. Like if it's going to negatively impact the goal that you're reaching towards, that you're working on, say no, don't do it. Just because it's a shiny object, it doesn't mean that it's the only thing that's ever going to happen or be presented to you. I also can almost guarantee if you say no to something that's not in alignment, something that is in alignment will pop up and be there for you, and you'll be able to move forward faster. I actually have a podcast episode on this because I think it's a really important point to not want to tap into that sort of scarcity mindset of like, I have to take everything that's ever happened or agree with everyone who says anything about my career because otherwise I'm not going to make it, versus tapping into your alignment, feeling into what you want to do and what you've set out to do, and sticking with that and not being afraid to say no.
That is a good message, because I just did that this week. Is I said no, and it felt really good. I departed one of the publications that I write for, and they were, kind of requesting a minimum. And it was just, given the current projects that I'm working on with the podcast and my full-time job and, my own personal stuff, I'm just like, this just doesn't fit into what I want to do ultimately. And like, music journalism is not ultimately what I want to do.
Yeah.
I love doing it, but it's not what I want to do, in 10 years, like you had mentioned earlier. So, they had a minimum requirement. I'm like, that's just going to be too much time. I'm not getting paid for that. And it's just like, it just doesn't align. So I respectfully declined and, parted ways with the publication. So it felt really good, and it's okay. Like, I didn't feel bad about it. We departed, it was, what do you call that? Amicable?
Yeah.
Amicably?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we parted ways, and it was we both agreed on it. It was cool. Like, I felt good. We both felt good, and it's okay. And I felt great about it, because it's just not something that I wanted to do. And it's okay to do that.
100%. And it feels so good when you actually do say no and you realize that it not only does it feel good, but it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't the end of the world. I feel so much more clear on what I'm doing. And I actually am really proud of myself and excited for sticking to my guns, sticking with my gut, and doing what feels good.
Absolutely. And that's why I was so glad to leave. And, I hadn't contributed a whole lot in the last couple months, but it was just something that it's just one less publication that I have to worry about, and I can focus on my own projects. That'll free up more time, because if the time that I'm spending doing the research and connecting with publicists and, fanning through my inbox of all the pitches that I'm getting, it's just like, I don't have that time, and I'd rather be putting that time in my podcast or my own music or, my own blog writing. So It felt really good to say no.
Yeah, I love that. I love that example.
When you're achieving your goals, how do you know when you're not doing enough? You can feel like, oh, I don't want to overwhelm myself, but I also feel like I can push myself a little bit harder. Like, how do you kind of deal with that contrast?
That is such a good question, because you know what? I don't see that a lot. I really don't.
Really?
No, because a lot of the women that I work with, and I mean, probably a lot of the women that I attract because of the work that I do, they're constantly feeling super guilty for not doing enough. And that's what makes it hard for them to prioritize wellness or other things, because they feel like when they're just chilling, they feel like they should be doing more. I think that the best way to do it is to use the structure, the sort of goal planning strategy that we talked about earlier in this episode, and you'll be able to track either, number one, am I overworking, and therefore I'm not only doing my big three, which is the three items we talked about each day, but I'm also feeling the need to do 3 more, and then 3 more, and then 3 more, and I can't stop myself. That's an indication that you're overworking. But if you're also getting stuck where you set out, you have your big 3, and then you notice that you're behind, you're not getting the things done in the trajectory that you thought you were going to, you're maybe just doing one thing a day or half a thing a day, and it doesn't feel good, and you spend the rest of the time on your phone scrolling through Instagram, that's a sign that you are either letting procrastination get to you, or something's not aligned, something's not working, and there's some adjustments that need to be happening there. I think that if you do the roadmap, what I like to call it, and you map out all the steps to get to your goal, and you have it in your calendar, and then by the end of the week, you check in with yourself and you say either I accomplished these things or I totally did not, I feel way behind right now and I feel way more stressed, that's going to be a sign that you need to adjust things. Now, with a small disclaimer that sometimes people, and I see this a lot, where they think that they're going to reach a goal way, way faster than they are. So it takes them longer to actually do the tasks. When they actually sit down to do it, it takes them longer to do the tasks that they set out to do, because they didn't account for the amount of time it was truly going to take. So sometimes it can feel like you're behind, when in reality, it's just that you need to extend your timeline a little bit more and give yourself more time. But audit yourself. Like, pay attention. Are you scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, which is my new addiction, and I like have to watch it every time.
Same.
I have the TikTok video guy who's like, you've been scrolling for a while. I'm like, okay. I didn't need to be attacked like that.
Yeah.
But it's a great feature, actually, because it really does keep on top of people. You know what you're doing, right? Like, if you're seeing these patterns, if you feel unfulfilled, if you don't feel happy, if you don't feel good with the progress that you're seeing or not seeing, that is a sign. Kick yourself into gear.
That's something I've been struggling with too, that's why I asked the question, because it's been something that I've been struggling with. Like, during the week, I have a full-time job and I'm working like 9:30 to 6:30, sometimes a little bit later. And I'm done and I'm like, I have podcasts to edit. I could do work on my podcast. I could do a blog post. I have some other projects I could be doing. I could be working on music. And I feel like if I'm not doing any of that, I'm not accomplishing anything. And then when it comes to the weekend, then I'm like, okay, I worked full time and I did a little bit of work on my podcast, but it's like I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. So now I have to do full time, and maybe it's a little bit of procrastination, but at the same time, during this quarantine, being locked in, I've kind of come to the self-realization that I know what my limits are and I do need to slow down a little bit because I am going to burn myself out. So maybe I do take, Saturday, Sunday, every other weekend to just kind of like unplug and not do anything and stay away from my computer and just kind of take a couple naps during the day, which is okay. We all need those days when we take a couple naps.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I think something interesting that's more of a general thing I would say from what you just said is acknowledging that pushing through the tired, like Lennon, let's say you get home from a full day's work and you're trying to force yourself to like write a piece, write a blog piece, or you're forcing yourself to like do the intro and edit the podcast, then coming from that energy, it's not going to be, it's going to take you 20 times longer, not actually 20, probably twice as long to do that thing because you're so exhausted than it would to just like relax, rest, get a good night's sleep, wake up and do it tomorrow, right? So you're going to save yourself some time by listening to your body and actually moving with your energetic needs and your just like heart needs. Like sometimes, especially with what's going on right now, those of us who are feeling this really heavily, we do need to give ourselves some time and some space in between the work and the doing to just rest and feel and fill up our cups. But also, if I was coaching you, Lennon, I would also say, how can you make this easier and more efficient for yourself, right? Like, can you batch work? Can you do a month of podcasts on one Saturday so that it's all done in one day? And then as the rest of the month goes on, you don't really have to worry about editing a podcast like on your night home from work because it's already done. And you might have taken more time on one Saturday or one weekend day than you usually would to work, but it's saving you a lot of time in the long run. And doing that batch work is going to get you in the zone of editing, and you're going to fly through it much faster than you would forcing yourself to do it when you don't really want to. Same goes for blog writing. Same goes for really any other task that you could batch work. Maybe not music, but other things.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I definitely do batch work. Like last night, I worked for like 4 or 5 hours on editing a podcast, and it's still like the audio editing is usually pretty quick. I don't do a whole lot of editing just because like I could spend hours on it and doing, production and EQing, and I don't spend that much time on it because I know I get a good solid quality recording beforehand. I just do a little bit of compression, bring up the levels, and make sure it's good to go. And that's basically all I do with the audio editing, but it's the stuff afterwards that I wish I could delegate, but I don't have the resources necessarily or money to kind of delegate some of these tasks. Like it would be ideal if I could literally record these and then send them somewhere or to a team or have somebody do it, and where they can just create the show notes, do the timestamps, do the transcription, get the video ready for Instagram, get the video ready for YouTube, get all the social media posts. Like I don't even do social media because I just literally don't have the time to promote like clips and stuff. So it's just like I could come in and do these different things, but I like doing this stuff on my own, but it just like I've gotten to a point where I know kind of what I want and it takes me so much time to do it. So I'm kind of stuck in that realm, but I'm working through it now. So I'm getting there eventually, but it's kind of overwhelming, but at the same time, I enjoy it.
Yeah, and definitely I think play to your strengths, right? Like you know what you're
Yes.
good at, stick with those, and then eventually you'll be able to work towards either slowly adding something to the plate or delegating something out that you don't want to be doing or that you're literally just like not good at doing and it takes a lot of your time.
Yeah. And I just recently started doing like transcriptions. I discovered a service called Otter, and I basically take the whole episode, and it's an artificial intelligence, and I upload it, and it translates the whole episode, and then I can turn the transcription into a blog post.
That's
for, like,
awesome.
yeah, it's super cool, but like obviously the transcription isn't perfect, so I have to go through an hour's worth and like correct the sentences, and that just takes so much time, and it's just like that's something I wish I could just kind of delegate. And then when it's done, just kind of proofread it and then be done with it. But
Yeah. Another lesson might be just do less, Like I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you are doing so much, which is amazing, but also like you can, for instance, put a podcast out without having the transcription of the episode and people will still listen to it. You'll still grow your podcast. You can get on social media without having like your photos edited for 20 minutes per photo to make it like absolutely stunningly perfect. Like whatever it might be, do less. Don't feel the need to like go above and beyond with everything. Take messy action, do what works for you, and then just slowly build upon that once you have the time and the energy. If it doesn't feel good for you and if you dread doing it, ask yourself, can I just get rid of this? Like, is it really serving me? Or how can I make this easier?
And that's the thing. Like, I like doing the transcription. I love playing with like new tools and learning different things. It's just that it's like I know it's going to take me a lot of time, and I know that in the long run, like I want to make my podcast more accessible, and that was kind of like the main goal. Is like
yeah.
in case somebody is hard of hearing or doesn't have those types of things, or maybe they just want to read a blog post, they don't want to listen to the episode or kind of skim through it. They can do that, and then on YouTube I can upload the transcriptions there, and then the words pop up. It's just more helpful, and I want to make it more accessible to everybody. But at the same time, it takes a lot of time to do it. I enjoy doing it. It's kind of fun to me, but it just, like I said, takes a lot of time to do it.
Yeah. And as long as you and the listeners like are examining and really evaluating like what purposes is this serving for me and my business, that's what's most important.
Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly what I did. I'm like, I know this can take a lot of time. Do I want to do it? Yes. And is it going to be beneficial? Yeah, I did some research on it prior to doing the transcriptions. But it's stressful, but it's also beneficial at the same time. And I enjoy doing it. So cool. That's that. We've been talking for an hour. I feel like we've been talking for like 15 minutes.
I know, went by fast.
This was such a great conversation. So that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything that you would like to add, or maybe like extend on that you mentioned, or any of the topics that we talked about?
I think we covered a lot of ground in this episode. I'll just say,
Yes.
Especially now, I'm not sure when this is going to post, but Len and I are recording this during like the peak of coronavirus. So especially now, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Listen to what you and your body needs. I promise you that the success will come even if you prioritize wellness. In fact, it will come easier if you do prioritize wellness and prioritize yourself and what you truly need to operate from your most productive, your happiest, and most aligned point.
That's very important. Don't kind of realign with yourself during this difficult time in the quarantine, and really figure out what is weighing you down. And don't overwhelm yourself, because that's the last thing you need to do is overwhelm yourself when you're stuck at home by yourself and or with a special someone, because we don't want to drive each other crazy.
Totally.
So how can the listeners follow you, Katie, and keep up with you and all the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Katie Zaccardi, and the podcast is at Out to Be Podcast. You can listen to the Out to Be Podcast, which is basically a podcast all around wellness, mindset, and mental health in the music industry, wherever you listen to podcasts. My website is katiezaccardi.com, and there you'll find more information about my coaching, my music, as well as the podcast. And otherwise, yeah, mostly hanging out on Instagram. So come say hi to me there, slide into my DMs, whatever works. I'd love to hear from you.
Great. And I will put all of your links in the show notes below as well so people can easily access them and then reach out if they have any questions.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, for your time today and for all the incredible information and the stories that you shared today. I learned a lot, and it's helped me kind of reinforce what I've been doing and what I will continue to do.
Thanks so much for having me, Lennon.